Is worse? Doing injustice or suffering injustice? I would say that suffering is worse.
And which is the greater disgrace? Answer.
Doing.
And the greater disgrace is the greater evil?
Certainly not.
If I understand correctly, you are saying that what is honorable is not the same as what is good, and what is disgraceful is not the same as what is evil.
Certainly not.
Let me ask you a question. When you talk about beautiful things, like bodies, colors, shapes, sounds, and institutions, don't you call them beautiful based on some standard? For example, bodies are beautiful to the extent that they are useful or pleasing to look at. Can you think of any other explanation for personal beauty?
I can't.
And would you say that figures or colors are beautiful because they give pleasure or have a purpose, or both?
Yes, I would.
And would you say the same about sounds and music?
Yes.
Laws and institutions also have no beauty unless they are useful or pleasing, or both?
I think so.
And can't the same be said about the beauty of knowledge?
Certainly, Socrates. I agree with measuring beauty based on pleasure and usefulness.
And deformity or disgrace can be measured by the opposite standard of pain and evil?
Definitely.
So, when one beautiful thing surpasses another in beauty, the measure of the excess is determined by pleasure, usefulness, or both.
That's true.
And when it comes to two deformed things, the one that surpasses the other in deformity or disgrace must exceed in pain or evil, right?
Yes.
But earlier, you mentioned something about doing wrong and suffering wrong. Didn't you say that suffering wrong is more evil and doing wrong is more disgraceful?
I did.
So, if doing wrong is more disgraceful than suffering wrong, the more disgraceful act must be more painful and must exceed in pain or evil, correct?
Of course.
First, let's consider whether the act of committing injustice surpasses the suffering and subsequent pain. Do the wrongdoers suffer more than the victims?
No, Socrates. Definitely not.
So, they don't exceed in pain?
No.
And if not in pain, then not in both?
Certainly not.
So, they can only exceed in the other?
Yes.
In other words, in evil?
True.
Therefore, doing injustice will have an excess of evil and will be a greater evil than suffering injustice?
Clearly.
But haven't you and the world already agreed that doing injustice is more disgraceful than suffering injustice?
Yes.
And now we find that doing injustice is also more evil?
True.
So, would you prefer a greater evil or a greater dishonor over a lesser one? Answer, polis, and don't be afraid. You won't come to any harm if you bravely submit to the healing power of the argument, just as you would to a physician, and either say yes or no to me.
I would say no.
Would anyone else prefer a greater evil over a lesser one?
No, not according to the way you presented it, Socrates.
Then I was right, polis, when I said that neither you, nor I, nor anyone else would rather do than suffer injustice. For doing injustice is the greater evil of the two.
That is the conclusion.
You see, polis, how different these two lines of argument are when we compare them. Everyone, except for me, agrees with your view. But your agreement and testimony are enough for me. I don't need anyone else. I accept your support and disregard the rest. Enough of this. Now let's move on to the next question. Is the greatest evil for a guilty person to suffer punishment, as you assumed, or is it a greater evil to escape punishment, as I assumed? Consider this. You would say that suffering punishment is another way of saying being justly corrected when you do wrong?
I would.
And would you agree that all just things are honorable because they are just? Take a moment to think and share your opinion.
Yes, Socrates, I believe they are.
Consider this again. Where there is an actor, must there also be a recipient?
I would say so.
And won't the recipient experience what the actor does, and won't the experience have the same quality as the action? For example, if a man strikes, there must be something that is struck.
Yes.
And if the striker strikes forcefully or quickly, what is struck will be struck forcefully or quickly.
True.
And the suffering of the one who is struck is of the same nature as the action of the one who strikes.
Yes.
And if a man burns, there is something that is burned.
Certainly.
And if he burns excessively or in a way that causes pain, the thing burned will be burned in the same way.
Clearly.
And if he cuts, the same argument applies, there will be something that is cut.
Yes.
And if the cutting is significant or deep or causes pain, the cut will be of the same nature.
That's obvious.
So, you would agree with the general proposition I just asserted, that the experience of the recipient corresponds to the action of the actor?
I agree.
In that case, since this is admitted, let me ask, is being punished a form of suffering or acting?
Suffering, Socrates. There's no doubt about that.
And suffering implies an actor?
Certainly, Socrates. And the punisher is the actor.
And the one who punishes rightly, punishes justly?
Yes.
So, he acts justly, right?
Yes, justly.
Then, if someone is punished and suffers retribution, they suffer justly?
That's obvious.
And what is just is considered honorable, correct?
Definitely.
So, the punisher is doing what is honorable, and the punished is experiencing what is honorable?
True.
And if it's honorable, then it's good, because what is honorable is either pleasant or useful, right?
Certainly.
So, the one who is punished is experiencing what is good.
That's true.
Then they are benefited?
Yes.
Do you mean the same thing as me when you say benefited? I mean that if someone is justly punished, their soul is improved.
Of course.
So, the one who is punished is freed from the evil of their soul?
Yes.
And therefore, they are freed from the greatest evil? Let's look at it this way. In terms of a person's possessions, is there a greater evil than poverty?
There is no greater evil.
And in terms of a person's physical health, would you say that weakness, illness, and deformity are the evils?
I would.
And don't you think that the soul also has its own evils?
Of course.
And you would call these evils injustice, ignorance, cowardice, and the like?
Certainly.
So, in terms of the mind, body, and possessions, which are three aspects, we have identified three corresponding evils: injustice, disease, and poverty.
True.
And which of these evils is the most disgraceful? Is it not injustice, which is generally the evil of the soul?
By far the most disgraceful.
And if it's the most disgraceful, then it's also the worst?
What do you mean, Socrates?
I mean to say that what is most disgraceful has already been acknowledged to be most painful or harmful, or both.
Certainly.
And now, we have admitted that injustice and all evil in the soul are the most disgraceful?
It has been admitted.
And the most disgraceful is either the most painful, causing excessive pain, or the most harmful, or both.
Certainly.
Therefore, being unjust, intemperate, cowardly, and ignorant is more painful than being poor and sick?
Well, Socrates, the painfulness doesn't seem to follow from your premises.
Then, if, as you argue, it's not more painful, the evil of the soul is the most disgraceful of all evils, and the excess of disgrace must be caused by some extraordinary harmfulness of the evil.
Clearly.
And that which exceeds in harmfulness will be the greatest of evils.
Yes.
So, injustice, intemperance, and in general, the depravity of the soul are the greatest of evils?
That is evident.
Now, what skill or art frees us from poverty? Isn't it the art of making money?
Yes.
And what skill or art frees us from disease? Isn't it the art of medicine?
Very true.
And what frees us from vice and injustice? If you can't answer immediately, ask yourself where we go with the sick and to whom we take them.
We go to the physicians, Socrates.
And to whom do we go with the unjust and intemperate?
You mean, we go to the judges.
Who are the ones to punish them?
Yes.
And don't those who rightfully punish others do so in accordance with a certain rule of justice?
Clearly.
So, the art of making money frees a person from poverty, medicine frees them from disease, and justice frees them from intemperance and injustice?
That is evident.
Which of these three is the best?
Can you list them?
Making money, medicine, and justice.
Justice, Socrates, clearly surpasses the other two.
And if justice is the best, does it bring the greatest pleasure or advantage, or both?
Yes.
But is being healed a pleasant thing, and do those who are being healed feel pleased?
I don't think so.
Is it a useful thing, then?
Yes.
Yes, because the patient is freed from a great evil, and this is the advantage of enduring the pain, to get well.
Certainly.
And would a person be happier in their physical condition if they were healed or if they had never been ill?
Clearly, the one who had never been ill.
Yes, because happiness doesn't consist in being freed from evils, but in never having experienced them.
True.
Now, consider the case of two individuals who have some evil in their bodies. One of them is healed and freed from the evil, while the other is not healed and still has the evil. Which of them is more miserable?
Clearly, the one who is not healed.
And didn't we say that punishment is a deliverance from the greatest evil, which is vice?
True.
And justice punishes us, makes us more just, and acts as the cure for our vice?
True.
Therefore, the person who has never had vice in their soul holds the highest position in the scale of happiness, as we have shown that vice is the greatest evil.
Clearly.
And the person who is freed from vice holds the second position.
True.
In other words, the one who receives admonition, rebuke, and punishment.
Yes.
So, the one who lives worst is the one who, having been unjust, is not freed from injustice?
Certainly.
In other words, the one who commits the greatest crimes and manages to escape rebuke, correction, or punishment. This has been achieved by Archelaus and other tyrants, rhetoricians, and powerful individuals, as you say. Compare Republic.
True.
May we compare their behavior, my friend, to that of a person who has the worst disease but refuses to pay the penalty to the physician for their actions against their own health, and refuses to be cured because they are afraid of the pain of being burned or cut. Isn't that a similar case?
Yes, indeed.
It seems like he doesn't understand the importance of health and physical strength. If we agree with our previous conclusions, those who try to avoid justice are in the same situation. They see justice as painful but are blind to the benefits that come from it. They don't realize that a diseased soul is much worse than a diseased body. They do everything they can to avoid punishment and the release from the greatest evil. They gather money and friends and use their persuasive skills. But if we are right, Polus, do you see what follows? Or should we draw out the consequences?
Please do.
Isn't it true that injustice and committing acts of injustice are the greatest evils?
That is clear.
And further, suffering punishment is the way to be released from this evil?
True.
And not suffering punishment perpetuates the evil?
Yes.
So, doing wrong is second only to suffering punishment, but doing wrong and not being punished is the greatest evil of all?
That is true.
Well, wasn't this the point of disagreement, my friend? You believe that Archelaus was happy because he was a great criminal who went unpunished. I, on the other hand, argued that he, or anyone like him who has done wrong and hasn't been punished, is the most miserable of all. I believe that the wrongdoer is more miserable than the one who suffers, and the one who escapes punishment is even more miserable than the one who suffers. Wasn't that what I said?
Yes.
And it has been proven to be true?
Certainly.
Well, Polus, if this is true, what is the purpose of rhetoric? If we accept what has just been said, every person should do everything possible to avoid doing wrong, as it will bring great evil upon them.
True.
And if he, or someone he cares about, does wrong, he should willingly go where he will be immediately punished. He should go to the judge, just as he would go to a doctor, so that the disease of injustice doesn't become chronic and incurable. Shouldn't we accept this consequence, Polus, if we want to maintain our previous admissions? Is there any other conclusion consistent with them?
There can only be one answer to that, Socrates.
Then rhetoric is of no use to us, Polus, in helping a person excuse their own injustice or that of their parents, friends, children, or country. but it may be useful to someone who believes that instead of excusing, they should accuse themselves first and foremost, and then their family or friends who may be doing wrong. They should expose the wrongdoing and not conceal it, so that the wrongdoer may suffer and be made whole. They should even force themselves and others to endure the pain, just like brave men who let a surgeon operate on them without flinching, in the hope of attaining the good and the honorable. If someone has done something deserving of punishment, they should allow themselves to be punished, whether it's through physical pain, fines, exile, or even death. They should be the first to accuse themselves and their own relatives. Rhetoric should be used for this purpose, to make their own and their unjust actions known, and to free themselves from injustice, which is the greatest evil. In that case, polis, rhetoric would indeed be useful. Do you agree or disagree?
Socrates, what you're saying seems very strange to me, although it is probably consistent with your premises.
If the premises are not disproven, isn't this the conclusion?
Yes, it certainly is.
Now, from the opposite point of view, if it is our duty to harm another person, whether they are an enemy or not, excluding self-defense, then I have to be cautious. But if my enemy harms a third person, then I should do everything in my power, through words and actions, to prevent them from being punished or appearing before a judge. And if they do appear, I should ensure that they escape punishment and don't suffer any consequences. If they have stolen money, they should keep it and spend it without regard for morality and justice. And if they have done things deserving of death, they should not die but continue to live in their wickedness. Or, if that's not possible, they should be allowed to live as long as they can. For such purposes, polis, rhetoric may be useful. But it is of little or no use to someone who has no intention of committing injustice. At least, we didn't discover such a use in our previous discussion.
Tell me, Charifin, is Socrates serious or joking?
I would say, Callicles, that he is very serious. But you can ask him yourself.
By the gods, I will. Socrates, tell me, are you serious or joking? Because if you are serious and what you say is true, then human life is completely turned upside down. Aren't we doing the opposite of what we should be doing in everything?
O Callicles, if there were no shared feelings among humans, if each person's feelings were unique to themselves and not experienced by others, I don't see how we could ever communicate our impressions to one another. I am making this remark because I see that you and I share a common understanding. We are both lovers, each with two loves. I love Alcibiades, the son of Cleinias, and philosophy, and you love the Athenian Demas and Demas, the son of Perilamps. I notice that, despite your cleverness, you never contradict your favorite in any word or opinion. You change your stance whenever they do. When the Athenian Demas disagrees with something you say in the assembly, you adopt their opinion. The same goes for Demas, the young son of Perilamps. You are unable to resist the words and ideas of your loves. If someone were to express surprise at the strange things you say under their influence, you would probably respond that you cannot help but say what your loves say unless they are prevented. You can only be silent when they are. You must understand that my words are also influenced by someone, so there is no need to wonder at me. But if you want to silence me, silence philosophy, who is my love. She always tells me what I am telling you now, my friend. Unlike my other love, who changes his mind constantly, philosophy is always true. She is the teacher whose words you find surprising, and you have heard her yourself. You must refute her and either prove that doing injustice and escaping punishment is not the worst of all evils, or, if you cannot refute her, then I swear by the god of Egypt, O Callicles, that you will never be at peace with yourself. Your whole life will be in discord. And yet, my friend, I would rather have an inharmonious lyre and no music in the chorus I provide, or even have the whole world oppose me, than be in conflict with myself and contradict myself.
Oh Socrates, you are quite the speaker and seem to be going off on a tangent in this argument. You are speaking this way because Polus has fallen into the same trap he accused Gorgias of falling into. He said that when you asked Gorgias if he would teach justice to someone who wanted to learn rhetoric but didn't know justice, Gorgias, out of modesty, replied that he would, fearing that people would be displeased if he said no. And because of this admission, Gorgias was forced to contradict himself, which seems to be something you enjoy. Polus laughed at you for this, and rightly so, in my opinion. But now he has fallen into the same trap himself. I can't say much for his wit when he conceded to you that doing injustice is more dishonorable than suffering injustice. This admission is what got him tangled up with you, and because he was too modest to say what he truly thought, you silenced him. The truth is, Socrates, that you, who claim to be pursuing truth, are now appealing to popular and vulgar notions of right and wrong, which are not natural but only conventional. Convention and nature often conflict with each other. So when a person is too modest to say what they truly think, they are forced to contradict themselves. And you, with your cleverness, take advantage of this and ask someone who is arguing conventionally a question that should be determined by the rule of nature. And if they are talking about the rule of nature, you shift the discussion to convention. For example, in this very discussion about doing and suffering injustice, when Polus was speaking about what is conventionally dishonorable, you attacked him from the perspective of nature. According to the rule of nature, suffering injustice is more disgraceful because it is a greater evil. But conventionally, doing evil is more shameful. Suffering injustice is not the act of a man, but of a slave who would be better off dead. When he is wronged and trampled upon, he is powerless to help himself or anyone he cares about. The reason for this, I believe, is that the makers of laws are the majority, who are weak. They make laws and distribute praise and blame based on their own interests. They intimidate the stronger individuals, those who could overpower them, so that they don't. They say that dishonesty is shameful and unjust, using the word injustice to mean a person's desire to have more than their neighbors. Knowing their own inferiority, they are probably glad for equality. And so, the attempt to have more than others is conventionally seen as shameful and unjust, and is called injustice. But nature itself suggests that it is just for the better to have more than the worse, for the more powerful to have more than the weaker. This is evident among men, animals, cities, and races. For what principle of justice did Xerxes invade Greece, or his father the Scythians? Not to mention countless other examples. No, but these are the men who act in accordance with nature, yes, by God, and in accordance with the law of nature. Not, perhaps, in accordance with that artificial law that we invent and impose on our fellow human beings, taking the best and strongest from their youth and taming them like young lions, charming them with words and telling them to be content with equality, that equality is honorable and just. But if there were a man who had enough strength, he would break free and escape from all this. He would disregard all our rules and laws that go against nature. The slave would rebel and become the ruler over us, and the light of natural justice would shine forth. This, I believe, is the sentiment of Pindar when he says in his poem that law is the king of all, of mortals as well as immortals. This, as he says, makes might to be right, doing violence with highest hand, as I infer from the deeds of Heracles, for without buying them, fragment insert. 151, Bach. I don't remember the exact words, but the meaning is that without buying them and without them being given to him, he took away the oxen of Geryon according to the law of natural right, and that the possessions of the weaker and inferior rightfully belong to the stronger and superior. And this is true, as you can confirm if you move beyond philosophy and delve into higher matters. Philosophy, Socrates, if pursued moderately and at the right age, is a refined pursuit, but too much philosophy ruins human life. Even if a person has talent, if they continue to pursue philosophy into later life, they will inevitably be ignorant of all the things that a gentleman and an honorable person should know. They will lack experience in the laws of the state and in the appropriate language to be used in human interactions, whether private or public. They will be completely ignorant of the pleasures and desires of mankind and of human character in general. And people like this, when they enter politics or business, are as ridiculous as I imagine politicians to be when they try to engage in philosophy. As Euripides says, every man shines in that and pursues that, and devotes the greatest portion of the day to that in which he most excels, Antiope, Fragment 20, Dindorf. But anything in which he is inferior, he avoids and belittles, praising the opposite out of self-interest and because he believes it will bring him praise. The true principle is to unite them. Philosophy, as part of education, is an excellent thing, and there is no shame in pursuing it when one is young. But as one grows older, it becomes ridiculous, and I feel about philosophers the same way I feel about those who lisp and imitate children. I enjoy seeing a young child who is not yet able to speak clearly, lisping in their play. There is a grace and freedom in their speech that is natural to their young age. But when I hear a small creature carefully enunciating their words, I am offended. The sound is unpleasant and has the twang of servitude to my ears. So when I hear a man lisping or acting like a child, I find their behavior ridiculous, unmanly, and deserving of punishment. And I have the same feeling towards students of philosophy. When I see a young person engaged in such studies, it seems fitting and befitting of someone with a liberal education. But if I see them continuing their studies in later life, without ever stopping, I would like to reprimand them, Socrates. Because, as I was saying, such a person, even if they have natural talent, becomes weak. They shy away from the bustling center and the marketplace, where, as the poet says, people become distinguished. They hide away for the rest of their lives, whispering with a few admiring youths, never speaking openly and confidently like a free person. Now, Socrates, I am well disposed towards you, and my sentiment can be compared to that of Zethus towards Amphion in Euripides' play, which I mentioned earlier. I am inclined to say to you, Socrates, that you are neglectful of the things you should be concerned about, and that you, who have a soul so noble, are remarkable for a puerile exterior. Neither in a court of justice could you state a case, or give any reason or proof, or offer valiant counsel on another's behalf. And you must not be offended, my dear Socrates, for I am speaking out of goodwill towards you when I ask if you are not ashamed of being so defenseless. And I affirm that this is not just your condition, but the condition of all those who take the study of philosophy too far. For suppose someone were to take you, or someone like you, and throw you in prison, accusing you of wrongdoing when you have done nothing wrong. You must admit that you would not know what to do, you would stand there, dizzy and speechless, without a word to say. And when you appeared before the court, even if the accuser were a weak and insignificant person, you would be at their mercy and would face death if they chose to demand it. And yet, Socrates, what is the value of an art that turns a sensible person into a fool, who is helpless and unable to save himself or others when he is in great danger and about to be stripped of all his possessions by his enemies, and has to live as a mere outcast without his rights as a citizen? He's a man who, if I may use the expression, can be slapped without consequence. So, my good friend, take my advice and stop arguing. Learn the philosophy of business and gain a reputation for wisdom. But leave these intricacies to others, whether they are described as foolishness or absurdities. Because they will only bring poverty into your life. So, stop imitating these petty word-splitters, and instead, imitate the person of substance and honor, who is successful.
If my soul, Callicles, were made of gold, wouldn't I be happy to find one of those stones used to test gold, the very best one that I could use to test my soul? And if the stone and I agreed on approving her training, then I would know that I was in a satisfactory state and that no other test was needed.
What do you mean, Socrates?
I will tell you. I think I have found in you the desired touchstone.
Why?
Because I am sure that if you agree with me on any of the opinions my soul forms, then I have truly found the truth. Because I believe that to fully evaluate the good or evil of the soul, a person should possess 3 qualities: knowledge, goodwill, and outspokenness, all of which you possess. Many people I meet cannot evaluate me because they lack wisdom like you do. Others are wise but won't tell me the truth because they don't have the same interest in me that you do. And these 2 strangers, Gorgias and Polus, are undoubtedly wise men and good friends of mine, but they are not outspoken enough and are too modest. In fact, their modesty is so great that they contradict themselves, one after the other, in front of a large audience, on matters of great importance. But you possess all the qualities that these others lack, having received an excellent education, as many Athenians can confirm. And you are my friend. Shall I tell you why I believe so? I know that you, Callicles, and Tisander of Aphidne, and Andron the son of Androtion, and Nausicydes of the Demi of Collarges, studied together. There were 4 of you, and I once heard you advising one another on how far the pursuit of philosophy should be taken. And as I recall, you concluded that the study should not be pursued in too much detail. You cautioned each other not to be overly wise, fearing that too much wisdom might unknowingly ruin you. And now, when I hear you giving me the same advice that you gave to your closest friends, I have sufficient evidence of your genuine goodwill towards me. And I am certain of your frankness and lack of modesty, as you have assured me yourself, a confirmation that is further supported by your last speech. Therefore, the conclusion in this case is clear. If you agree with me in an argument about any point, that point has been sufficiently tested by us and does not require further examination. Because you could not have agreed with me due to a lack of knowledge or excessive modesty, nor out of a desire to deceive me, as you are my friend, as you yourself have told me. And so, when you and I agree, we will have achieved perfect truth. Now, Callicles, there is no nobler inquiry than the one you criticize me for undertaking. What should a person's character be? What pursuits should they engage in, and to what extent, both in adulthood and in youth? Because if I make mistakes in my own conduct, it is not intentional but due to ignorance. Therefore, do not stop advising me now that you have begun, until I have clearly learned what I should practice and how I can acquire it. And if you find me agreeing with your words and later not acting in accordance with what I agreed to, call me a fool and consider me unworthy of further instruction. Once again, tell me what you and Pindar mean by natural justice. Do you not mean that the superior should take the property of the inferior by force, that the better should rule over the worse, and the noble should have more than the common? Am I remembering correctly?
Yes, that is what I was saying, and I still affirm it.
And by better, do you mean the same as superior? Because at the time, I couldn't understand what you were saying, whether by superior you meant the stronger, and that the weaker must obey the stronger, as you seemed to imply when you said that great cities attack smaller ones in accordance with natural right because they are superior and stronger, as if the superior, stronger, and better were the same. Or whether the better can also be the inferior and weaker, and the superior can be the worse. Or whether better should be defined in the same way as superior. This is the point I want to have clarified. Are the superior, better, and stronger the same or different?
I unequivocally say that they are the same.
So, you're saying that the many, who make the laws, are naturally superior to the one against whom the laws are made?
Certainly.
Therefore, the laws made by the many are the laws of the superior?
That's correct.
So, they are the laws of the better, since the superior class is far better, as you said?
Yes.
And since they are superior, the laws made by them are naturally good?
Yes.
And as you said before, the many believe that justice is equality and that it is more disgraceful to do injustice than to suffer from it. Is that true?
Yes, that is the opinion of the many.
So, both custom and nature affirm that it is more disgraceful to do injustice and that justice is equality. It seems that you were wrong when you accused me of playing dishonestly between nature and custom. You said that nature and custom are opposed, and I appeal to custom when the argument is about nature, and to nature when the argument is about custom. But it turns out that both nature and custom agree.
This man will never stop talking nonsense. Socrates, aren't you ashamed to be nitpicking and chuckling over a verbal slip at your age? Don't you see that when I say superior, I mean better? Do you think I'm saying that a rabble of slaves and useless people, who are only good for their physical strength, can make laws?
Ah, so that's your position?
Certainly.
I suspected as much, Callicles, which is why I asked you to clarify what you meant by superior. I wanted to understand your meaning clearly. Surely, you don't think that two men are better than one, or that your slaves are better than you because they are stronger? Please start again and tell me who the better are, if they are not the stronger. And I kindly ask you, great sir, to be a bit more patient with me, or else I might have to run away from you.
You're being sarcastic.
No, I swear by the hero Zethus, Callicles, whose age you were just invoking to make ironic remarks about me, I'm not being sarcastic. Now, tell me, whom do you mean by the better?
I mean the more excellent.
Don't you see that you're using words that have no meaning and not explaining anything? Will you tell me if by the better and superior, you mean the wiser? If not, then who?
Yes, I do mean the wiser.
So, according to you, one wise man may often be superior to 10,000 fools, and he should rule over them, and they should be his subjects, and he should have more than them. That's what I believe you mean. And please don't think I'm just being nitpicky. If you agree that the one is superior to the 10,000, then that's what you mean, right?
Yes, that's what I mean. And that's what I consider to be natural justice, that the better and wiser should rule and have more than the inferior.
Stop there, and let me ask you this. Let's suppose we're all together as we are now. There are several of us, and we have a large common supply of food and drink. There are people of various degrees of strength and weakness among us, and one of us, a physician, is wiser than all the rest when it comes to food. He's probably stronger than some of us, but not as strong as others. Being wiser, wouldn't he also be better than us and superior to us in matters of food?
Certainly.
So, either he will have a larger share of the food and drink because he is better, or he will have the authority to distribute them, but he won't consume or use a larger share for himself. And if he does, he will be punished. His share will be more than some and less than others. And if he happens to be the weakest of all, he, being the best of all, will have the smallest share of all, calicles. Am I right, my friend?
You're talking about food and drink and physicians and other nonsense. I'm not talking about those things.
Well, do you admit that the wiser is the better? Answer yes or no.
Yes.
And shouldn't the better have a larger share?
Not of food and drink.
I understand. Then perhaps of clothing? Shouldn't the most skilled weaver have the largest and finest coats and the greatest number of them?
Enough about coats.
So, the most skilled and best shoemaker should have the advantage in shoes. The shoemaker should walk around in the largest shoes and have the greatest number of them, right?
Enough about shoes. What nonsense are you talking?
Or, if that's not what you mean, perhaps you would say that the wise, good, and true farmer should have a larger share of seeds and as much seed as possible for his own land?
You keep going on, always talking in the same way, Socrates.
Yes, calicles, and about the same things.
Yes, by the gods, you always talk about cobblers, fullers, cooks, and doctors, as if they have any relevance to our argument.
But why won't you tell me what qualities a person must possess to claim a larger share? Will you not accept or offer a suggestion?
I have already told you. I mean wise politicians who understand how to govern a state. They must not only be wise, but also brave and capable of carrying out their plans. They should not be weak-willed.
Calicles, my friend, notice how different my accusation against you is from yours against me. You accuse me of always saying the same thing, but I accuse you of never saying the same thing about the same things. You have defined the better and superior as the stronger, then the wiser, and now you introduce a new idea: the superior and better are now declared by you to be the more courageous. I wish you would tell me once and for all who you believe to be the better and superior, and in what way they are better.
I have already told you that I mean those who are wise and courageous in governing a state. They should be the rulers of their states, and justice consists in them having more than their subjects.
But whether rulers or subjects, will they or will they not have more than themselves, my friend?
What do you mean?
I mean that every person is their own ruler. But perhaps you think that they don't need to rule themselves, only others?
What do you mean by ruling over oneself?
It's simple enough. It means being temperate, having self-control, and being the master of one's own desires and passions.
How innocent. You mean those fools, the temperate?
Certainly. Anyone can understand that's what I mean.
Exactly, Socrates. And they are truly fools, because how can a person be happy if they are the servant of anything? On the contrary, I firmly assert that a person who truly wants to live should let their desires grow to the fullest and not restrain them. When their desires have reached their peak, they should have the courage and intelligence to fulfill them and satisfy all their longings. And I declare this to be natural justice and nobility. However, the majority of people cannot attain this, and they criticize the strong individual because they are ashamed of their own weakness, which they want to hide. That's why they say that temperance is base. As I have mentioned before, they enslave the nobler individuals and, being unable to satisfy their own pleasures, they praise temperance and justice out of their own cowardice. If a person were originally born as a king or had the ability to acquire an empire or tyranny or sovereignty, what could be more base or evil than temperance? For someone like him, who could freely enjoy all the good things in life and has no obstacles, but has allowed customs, reason, and the opinions of others to rule over him. Wouldn't he be in a miserable state? The reputation of justice and temperance prevents him from giving more to his friends than to his enemies, even if he is a ruler in his city. No, Socrates, since you claim to be a seeker of truth, I will tell you the truth. Luxury, intemperance, and indulgence, if provided with means, are virtue and happiness. Everything else is just a trinket, agreements that go against nature, foolish talk of men, worthless.
Callicles, there is a noble freedom in your approach to the argument. What you say is what the rest of the world thinks but doesn't like to say. I ask you to continue so that the true rule of human life may become clear. Tell me, do you not say that in a well-developed person, the passion should not be controlled, but rather allowed to grow to the fullest and somehow satisfied, and that this is virtue?
Yes, that's what I believe.
Then those who want nothing are not truly happy.
No, because then stones and dead men would be the happiest of all.
According to your view, life is a terrible thing. In fact, I think Euripides may have been right when he said, "Who knows if life be not death and death life?" We might actually be dead right now. I have heard a philosopher say that our bodies are our tombs and that the part of our soul where desires reside can be easily influenced by words. Some clever person, probably from Sicily or Italy, played with words and compared the soul, because of its belief and make-believe nature, to a vessel. They called the ignorant ones the uninitiated or leaky, and the part of their souls where desires reside, the intemperate and incontinent part, they compared to a vessel full of holes because it can never be satisfied. This person does not share your perspective, Callicles. They claim that among all the souls in the afterlife, these uninitiated or leaky individuals are the most miserable. They pour water into a vessel full of holes using a colander with holes. The colander, as my informant assures me, is the soul, and the soul which he compares to a colander is the soul of the ignorant, which is likewise full of holes, and therefore incontinent, owing to a bad memory and lack of faith. These ideas are strange enough, but they reveal the principle which, if I can, I would like to prove to you, that you should change your mind, and instead of living an intemperate and insatiable life, choose one that is orderly and sufficient and provides for daily needs. Am I making any impression on you? Are you starting to believe that those who live orderly lives are happier than the intemperate? Or do I fail to persuade you? Do you still hold the same opinion, no matter how many stories I tell you?
The latter, Socrates, is closer to the truth.
Well, I will tell you another analogy, which comes from the same school. Please consider whether you would accept this as an explanation of the two lives of the temperate and intemperate, in a figurative sense. There are two men, both of whom have several barrels. One man has his barrels intact and full, one with wine, another with honey, and a third with milk, along with others filled with different liquids. The streams that fill them are few and scarce, and he can only obtain them with a great deal of effort and difficulty. But once his barrels are filled, he no longer needs to feed them, and he has no further trouble or concern about them. The other man, similarly, can acquire streams, though not without difficulty. However, his vessels are leaky and unsound, and he is compelled to constantly fill them day and night. If he pauses for a moment, he is in pain. These are their respective lives. Now, would you say that the life of the intemperate is happier than that of the temperate? Don't I convince you that the opposite is true?
You do not convince me, Socrates. The one who has filled himself no longer experiences any pleasure. His life is like that of a stone. He feels neither joy nor sorrow once he is filled. The pleasure depends on the excess of what is poured in.
But the more you pour in, the greater the waste, and the holes must be large for the liquid to escape.
Certainly.
The life you are describing is not that of a dead man or a stone, but that of a cormorant. You mean that he is to be hungry and eat?
Yes.
And he is to be thirsty and drink?
Yes, that is what I mean. He is to have all his desires fulfilled and be able to live happily by satisfying them.
Excellent. carry on as you have begun, without shame. I, too, must rid myself of shame. First, tell me, would you include itching and scratching, provided you have enough of them and spend your life scratching, in your idea of happiness?
What a strange being you are, Socrates. You speak like a demagogue.
That's why I scared Polus and Gorgias, until they were too modest to say what they thought. But you will not be too modest, and you will not be scared, for you are a brave man. Now, answer my question.
I answer that even the one who scratches would live pleasantly.
And if pleasantly, then also happily?
Of course.
But what if the itching is not limited to the head? Shall I continue the question? Here, Calicles, I want you to consider how you would respond if consequences are pressed upon you. Especially if, as a last resort, you are asked whether the life of a catamite is not terrible, foul, and miserable. Or would you dare to say that they too are happy, as long as they get enough of what they want?
Aren't you ashamed, Socrates, to introduce such topics into the argument?
Well, my dear friend, am I the one introducing these topics, or is it the person who claims, without any qualification, that anyone who experiences pleasure in any way is happy, and who makes no distinction between good and bad pleasures? And I still want to ask, do you say that pleasure and good are the same, or is there some pleasure that is not good?
Well, for the sake of consistency, I will say they are the same.
You are going against our original agreement, Calicles, and you will no longer be a satisfactory companion in the search for truth if you say something that contradicts your true opinion.
Why, that's what you're doing too, Socrates.
Then we are both in the wrong. However, my dear friend, I ask you to consider whether pleasure, regardless of its source, is the good. Because if that's true, then the unpleasant consequences that have been hinted at must follow, along with many others.
That, Socrates, is just your opinion.
And do you, Calicles, genuinely believe what you are saying?
Indeed I do.
Well, since you are serious, shall we continue with the argument?
By all means. Or, I am in profound earnest.
If you are willing to continue, please answer this question for me. There is something, I presume, that you would call knowledge?
There is.
And weren't you saying just now that courage implies knowledge?
I was.
And you were speaking of courage and knowledge as two different things?
Certainly I was.
And would you say that pleasure and knowledge are the same or not the same?
They are not the same, O wise man.
Do you believe that courage is different from pleasure?
Definitely.
Well, let's remember that Calicles, the Acarnanian, claims that pleasure and good are the same, but knowledge and courage are not the same either with each other or with the good.
And what does our friend Socrates, from Foxton, say? Does he agree with this or not?
He does not agree, and neither will Calicles when he sees the truth. You would agree, I suppose, that good and bad fortune are opposites?
Yes.
And if they are opposites, then, like health and disease, they exclude each other. A person cannot have both or be without both at the same time, right?
What do you mean?
Let's take the example of any bodily condition. Can a person have the eye condition called ophthalmia?
Yes, of course.
But can they also have healthy and sound eyes at the same time?
Definitely not.
And when they get rid of their ophthalmia, do they also get rid of the health of their eyes? Do they lose both at the same time?
Definitely not.
That would be strange and absurd, wouldn't it?
Very much so.
I suppose that a person is affected by these conditions and gets rid of them one at a time?
Yes.
And they can have strength and weakness in the same way, alternating between the two?
Yes.
Or speed and slowness?
Certainly.
And can they have and not have good and happiness, as well as their opposites, evil and misery, in a similar alternating manner?
Yes, they can.
If there is something that a person can have and not have at the same time, then it cannot be both good and evil. Do we agree? Please think before answering.
I completely agree.
Let's go back to our previous agreements. Did you say that hunger, in its mere state, is painful or pleasant?
I said it's painful, but eating when you're hungry is pleasant.
I understand, but the actual feeling of hunger is painful, right?
Yes.
And thirst is also painful?
Yes, very much so.
Do I need to give more examples, or would you agree that all wants or desires are painful?
I agree, so there's no need for more examples.
Very good. And you would admit that drinking when you're thirsty is pleasant?
Yes.
And in the sentence you just said, the word thirsty implies pain?
Yes.
And the word drinking expresses pleasure and the satisfaction of the desire?
Yes.
So drinking is pleasurable?
Definitely.
When you're thirsty? And in pain?
Yes.
Do you see the inference? When you say that being thirsty, you drink, pleasure and pain are simultaneous. They affect the same part, whether it's the soul or the body. It doesn't matter which part is affected. Is this true?
It is.
You also said that a person cannot have good and bad fortune at the same time?
Yes, I did.
But you admitted that when in pain, a person might also have pleasure?
Clearly.
Then pleasure is not the same as good fortune, and pain is not the same as bad fortune. Therefore, good is not the same as pleasant?
I wish I knew, Socrates, what you're trying to argue.
You know, Callicles, but you pretend not to know.
Well, continue and don't waste time. Then you'll see how wise you are in admonishing me.
Doesn't a person stop being thirsty and stop experiencing the pleasure of drinking at the same time?
I don't understand what you're saying.
Come on, Callicles, answer, if only for our sake. We'd like to hear the argument through.
Yes, Gorgias, but I must complain about Socrates' constant trivial arguments. He always argues about insignificant and unworthy questions.
What does it matter? Your reputation, Callicles, is not at stake. Let Socrates argue in his own way.
Well, Socrates, if Gorgias wants to hear these petty questions, then go ahead and ask them.
Callicles, I envy you for having been initiated into the great mysteries before the lesser ones. I thought that wasn't allowed. But let's go back to our argument. Doesn't a person stop being thirsty and stop experiencing the pleasure of drinking at the same moment?
True.
And if they're hungry or have any other desire, don't they stop desiring and experiencing pleasure at the same moment?
Very true.
So they stop feeling pain and pleasure at the same moment?
Yes.
But they don't stop experiencing good and bad at the same moment, as you admitted. Do you still stand by what you said?
Yes, I do. But what's the conclusion?
Well, my friend, the conclusion is that pleasure is not the same as good, and pain is not the same as evil. Pleasure and pain cease at the same moment, but good and bad are different. So how can pleasure be the same as good, or pain the same as evil? And let me show you another perspective that you probably didn't consider when you equated them. Aren't things considered good because they have goodness present in them, just like beautiful things are considered beautiful because they have beauty present in them?
Yes.
And would you call fools and cowards good people? Because you just said that the courageous and wise are the good ones. Would you agree with that?
Definitely.
Have you ever seen a foolish child or a foolish man rejoicing?
Yes, I have. What's your point?
No particular point, just seeking your answer.
Yes, I have seen sensible men rejoice and sorrow too.
Who rejoices and sorrows more, the wise or the foolish?
I think they are about equal in that respect.
Fair enough. Have you ever seen a coward in battle?
Of course.
Who rejoices more at the departure of the enemy, the coward or the brave?
I would say both rejoice equally, or at least they rejoice to a similar extent.
It doesn't matter. So both the cowards and the brave rejoice?
Yes, greatly.
And the foolish too, it seems?
Yes.
Are only the cowards pained at the approach of their enemies, or do the brave also feel pain?
Both feel pain.
Are they equally pained?
I imagine that cowards feel more pain.
And aren't they more pleased at the departure of the enemy?
I suppose so.
So it seems that the foolish, the wise, the cowards, and the brave all feel pleasure and pain to a similar extent. But do cowards feel more pleasure and pain than the brave?
Yes.
But surely the wise and brave are good, and the foolish and cowardly are bad?
Yes.
So the good and the bad feel pleasure and pain to a similar extent?
Yes.
Does that mean the good and bad are equally good and bad, or do the bad have an advantage in experiencing more pleasure and pain?
I don't really understand what you mean.
Well, do you remember saying that the good are good because they have good things with them, and the bad are bad because they have bad things? And that pleasures are good things and pains are bad things?
Yes, I remember.
And aren't these pleasures or good things present when people rejoice?
Certainly.
So those who rejoice are good when good things are present with them?
Yes.
And those who are in pain have evil or sorrow present with them?
Yes.
And would you still say that the evil are evil because of the presence of evil?
I would.
Then those who rejoice are good, and those who are in pain are evil?
Yes.
The degrees of good and evil vary with the degrees of pleasure and pain?
Yes.
Do the wise man and the fool, the brave and the coward, experience joy and pain to a similar extent? Or would you say that the coward feels more?
I would say that the coward feels more.
Help me then to draw the conclusion that follows from our admissions. It's good to repeat and review what is good, as they say. We agree that both the wise and the brave are good?
Yes.
And the foolish and the cowardly are evil?
Certainly.
And those who experience joy are good?
Yes.
And those who are in pain are evil?
Certainly.
Both the good and evil feel joy and pain, but perhaps the evil feel more?
Yes.
So, must we not conclude that the bad person is as good and bad as the good person, or perhaps even better? Is this not a logical inference that follows from the assertion that the good and the pleasant are the same? Can you deny this, Callicles?
I have been listening and making admissions to you, Socrates, and I notice that if someone grants you something in conversation, you, like a child, want to hold on to it and not give it back. But do you really think that I or anyone else denies that some pleasures are good and others are bad?
Alas, Callicles, how unfair you are. You treat me as if I were a child, sometimes saying one thing and then another, as if you were trying to deceive me. And yet, I initially thought you were my friend and wouldn't deceive me if you could have helped it. But I see now that I was mistaken. I suppose I must make the best of a bad situation, as they used to say, and take what I can get from you. So, as I understand it, I can assume that some pleasures are good and others are evil?
Yes.
The beneficial ones are good, and the harmful ones are evil?
Of course.
And the beneficial ones are those that do some good, and the harmful ones are those that do some evil?
Yes.
Take, for example, the bodily pleasures of eating and drinking that we mentioned earlier. You mean to say that the ones that promote health or any other bodily excellence are good, and their opposites are evil?
Certainly.
And in the same way, there are good pains and there are bad pains?
Certainly.
Shouldn't we choose and indulge in the good pleasures and pains?
Certainly.
But not the bad ones?
Clearly.
Because, if you remember, Polus and I agreed that all our actions are done for the sake of the good. Will you agree with us in saying that the good is the end of all our actions, and that all our actions are done for the sake of the good, and not the other way around? Will you add a third vote to our two?
I will.
So, pleasure, like everything else, should be pursued for the sake of what is good, and not the other way around, right?
Yes, that's correct.
But can anyone determine which pleasures are good and which are bad, or do they need knowledge or expertise in that area?
They need expertise.
Let me remind you of what I said to Gorgias and Polus. I mentioned that some activities are solely focused on pleasure and have no concept of what is better or worse, while others understand good and evil. I considered cooking, which I don't consider an art but merely an experience, to belong to the former category, concerned with pleasure. On the other hand, the art of medicine belongs to the latter category, concerned with what is good. Now, I beg you, Callicles, not to joke or think that I am joking with you. Please don't answer randomly or contrary to your true opinion. We are discussing the way of human life, and to a sensible person, what question can be more serious than this? Should one follow the path you encourage me to take, which involves speaking in the assembly, cultivating rhetoric, and engaging in public affairs according to the current principles? Or,